Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in Studio West. Last week I'm in Studio West for a long time, so I'm glad to be here. Very sad day. Pope Francis died last night of a stroke. Within a day of meeting with Vice President J.D. Vance and his family, we saw pictures of that, so it came as quite the startling surprise this morning to wake up to the news that the Pope had died. It immediately sets in motion a lot of different stories. I'll cover that later with Arthur Brooks, who's going to be along a little bit later. We may be able to find Ryan Anderson as well. There are a few Catholics in the United States, George Weigel among them, who actually know what's going on inside the Vatican. I'm not one of them, and I don't believe in the list of papabili that are just sort of thrown around and made up as you go along. You'll hear about Cardinal Erdo, for example, from Hungary. He's 72 years old, and the conservatives like him, and liberals like the Secretary of State, whose name is Parolin. I don't know where they are. I have one observation. It has been since 1995 that the Catholic Church has had a pope under the age of 75. So that's the year in which John Paul II, St. John Paul II, turned 75, which was in 1995. And for the next 30 years, the pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church has been at least 75 years old, and usually much older. And I think that's got a way on the cardinal. It's a little dusty. Can I put it that way? A little dusty. I'm not being ageist. I'm just saying, not only is there the baby boom that is younger than the last three popes, but so is all the baby boom, but the millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, everybody. Now, that doesn't mean anything doctrinally. It's more aesthetically. I just think the optics of a papacy that is septuagenarian and octogenarian and nonagenarian is not good. And there are only two metrics that matter to me. How many people are going to Mass out of the 1.4 billion Catholics, of whom I am one? So I went to Mass yesterday, Easter Sunday. And how many priests are there? There are at present in the world 408,000 priests. That has been relatively stable since about 1970. So there was a drop-off right before Vatican II in the late 50s. Vatican II ran from, I think, 1962 to 1965. Can't remember really. But then there was another drop-off as more than 100,000 priests said, nah, not going to do this. And they left. And we've been at about 400,000. And the age has been getting older and older and older. So I believe in the United States, the average age of a priest is 70. I believe. I don't know. I'm open to being wrong about that, but I believe that is it. Doesn't mean that there aren't some young priests. There are some great young priests. My diocese in Virginia is the Diocese of Arlington. They turn out, Bishop Burbidge is a great bishop. He turns out a lot of great young priests every year. On the West Coast, you're more than likely to run in priests who are not from America, though they have trained in America at St. John's Seminary or another seminary out here. My priest out here is Vietnamese. And that's not at all uncommon in Orange County and in Los Angeles County and San Diego County, as are Latino priests, Chinese priests. Very, very eclectic mix. But they just don't have enough of them. So much so that I had Susan Collins on the show last week talking about reforms to the R1 visa program, which allows religious workers, that would allow religious workers to stay longer than 5 years. So there won't be any news, real news, as opposed to gossip, for at least 15 days. There's a period of mourning of 9 days for the Pope. Then there's a period of a week before the conclave can actually close the doors on the Sistine Chapel, and sometimes that doesn't get started for 20 days. So it's 3 to 4 weeks before the world's 1.4 billion Catholics know who their new pontiff is. So don't come out hot. Don't roll out hot with it's going to be this guy or that guy. Nobody knows. And I'm just kind of hoping for a repeat of 1978 when door number two, the first door number one was John Paul I, and he died very soon after he became Pope. And behind door number two was John Paul II, Karl Wojtyła. And that was amazing because it carried with it, I was a young man then, I'm not now, but an electric jolt in 1978. I think he was 58. And all of us, we'd gotten used to Pope Pius, I think, Pope Paul VI forever. It's all I could remember. I didn't remember John the 23rd. I was a kid, child, didn't have any memory of him. Barely remember Paul VI because he was a reclusive figure who didn't get out much, made a couple of trips, but it was an Italian church at that point, and the bishops really did their own thing around the world. But John Paul worked in tandem with Reagan and Thatcher to bring down the Soviet Union and to take care of his homeland, Poland, and he meant something to non-Catholics. I would like for a pope like that again. I'm going to play in hours 2 or 3 a bit of an interview I did with Wim Wenders, film director extraordinaire, from 2018 when he had a movie come out about Francis, for those of you who want to reminisce a little bit about that. But let's first turn to the news of the day, which is President Trump at the White House Easter egg roll, cut number 7.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, and a very happy Easter to everyone. It was a beautiful day yesterday, and it's a beautiful day today. We don't have to worry about sunburn, but looks like it's not going to be raining. It's going to be really something special. 40,000, 42,000 people are expected all throughout the day, and it's an honor to have you. I just signed an executive order putting the flags of our country, all of them, all federal flags and state flags, at half-mast in honor of Pope Francis. So he was a good man, worked hard. He loved the world, and it's an honor to do that. I want to thank everybody for being here. This is some band. I've heard this band actually indirectly for 4 years and very directly now for 4.5. And I like the direct method even better. But the Marine Corps band is very, very special. Thank you very much. What a great job. Thank you. Thank you. I also want to thank the National Park Service, the job they do in making everything so beautiful and spiffy. And I'm very difficult when it comes to that. I will tell you, very, very difficult. And I say they have done an incredible job. You just have to look around and see.
Cut number 8, he kept talking.
Speaking of special, Easter is special, and it's one of our favorite days. It's one of our favorite periods of time. We're honoring Jesus Christ, and we're going to honor Jesus Christ very powerfully throughout our lives, all throughout our lives, not just now, all throughout our lives. We're bringing religion back in America. We're bringing a lot of things back, but religion is coming back to America. That's why you see the kind of numbers that you're seeing, the spirit and the kind of numbers that you're seeing. So,
now, what I like is that the Easter Bunny's on the balcony next to him. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can watch him now point the audience and the bunny to the news media, cut number 9. He points to kids and says, see what that is? That's the fake news. Then he goes and works the press line a little bit, cut number 10.
You talked about Jesus in your opening statement. Yeah. How important is this country right now?
Very important. It brings the country together. I mean, it's so important that we can do that. Religion, I said, bring religion back. Religion keeps you together. It's such a great thing.
Number 11, asked about Pete Hegseth.
I mean, I hear they're doing that whole thing again. Here we go again. Just a waste of time. He is doing a great job.
Why do you still have confidence?
Because he's doing a great job. Thanks, Ask the Houthis how he's doing. Ask the Houthis.
It's pretty funny. Cut number 12, one last cut.
Do you remember the bunny with Joe Biden? Remember? Do you remember when the bunny took Joe Biden out. He's not taking Trump out. Anyway, that was a beautiful moment when the bunny.
It's by the way, very funny recollection. The bunny did take out Joe. That was the beginning of the end. A bunny took out Jimmy Carter, too, if you remember, the killer rabbit. And a bunny at Easter Day, at the Easter egg roll, took out Joe Biden, I guess 3 years ago. Coming right back, America. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Archbishop Hugh, the Archbishop Emeritus of Philadelphia. You heard him on Friday in an interview I play on Good Friday, which is a Salem holiday. So it's a pre-recorded show. And I always play the interview with Archbishop Hugh about his book, Things Worth Dying For. Well, the Archbishop posted at First Things this morning a piece about Francis after his death was announced that I think is on point. The Archbishop writes, I have personal memories of Pope Francis that I greatly value. A friendly and generous working relationship at the 1997 Synod on America when we were both newly appointed archbishops. His personal welcome and warmth at Rome's 2014 Humanum Conference, and the extraordinary success of his 2015 visit to Philadelphia for the 8th World Meeting of Families. He devoted himself to serving the Church and her people in the ways he felt the times demanded. As a brother in the faith and as a successor of Peter, he deserves our ongoing prayers for his eternal life in the presence of the God that he loved. Having said that, an interregnum between papacies is a time for candor. The lack of it, given today's challenges, is too expensive. In many ways, whatever its strength, Francis's pontificate was inadequate to the real issues facing the Church. He had no direct involvement in the Second Vatican Council and seemed to resent the legacy of his immediate predecessors who did, men who worked and suffered to incarnate the Council's teachings faithfully into Catholic life. His personality tended towards the temperamental and autocratic. He resisted even loyal criticism. He had a pattern of ambiguity and loose words that sowed confusion and conflict. In the face of deep cultural fractures on matters of sexual behavior and identity, Francis condemned gender ideology, but seemed to downplay a compelling Christian theology of the body. He was impatient with canon law and proper procedure. His signature project, Synodality, was heavy on process and deficient in clarity. Despite an inspiring outreach to society's margins, his papacy lacked a confident, dynamic, evangelical zeal, the intellectual excellence to sustain a salvific and not merely ethical Christian witness in a skeptical modern world was likewise absent. What the Church needs going forward is a leader who can marry personal simplicity with a passion for converting the world to Jesus Christ, a leader who has a heart of courage and a keen intellect to match it. Anything less won't work. That's it. Now, I think that's right over the target. I think that's a bullseye. If you want that, if you want to send it to a friend of yours, I posted it over at my X account at Hugh Hewitt, and I'll post the beginning of this program and that as my opening monologue at my YouTube channel, which I hope you'll consider subscribing to as well. We put everything up there, so the first and the third segment of today's show will be on the YouTube channel. Now I want to go back to Friday night. I was on Brett Baer's special report. I'll be on Hannity tonight with Sean, for those of you who are wondering and eagerly awaiting the next pop-up on Fox. Will be tonight in the 9 p.m. hour on Sean Hannity's show. But I was on Friday night with Brett, and the question was about Senator Van Hollen's trek down to El Salvador, and it came this way, cut number 2.
Hugh, what is your take on all of this as we're digesting all this information that's coming on all sides of this case and what it means broader for the administration policy?
I think the broad take, Brett, is there's a family feud within the Democratic Party between the ascendant left, which is Bernie Sanders and AOC, and I think Chris Van Holland is trying to put down a marker there. And the ascendant left is socialist, it's DEI and CRT, it junked the defund the police stuff, and it's added now being anti-pro-Israel, and it's added being anti-immigration. And so Donald Trump, they're basically polarizing against everything Donald Trump is for, and that's going to cause a deep split in the Democratic Party because some of them are part of the old liberal left coalition that got behind Joe Biden in 2020. But the AOC, Bernie, Van Holland, that's a hard left version of the Democratic Party that will be a much smaller version of the Democratic Party. And they can't stay anti-illegal immigrant because that's not where the country is. So I think that's exactly what's going on, is that Chris Van Hollen went to El Salvador to try and out AOC. But you can't out AOC unless you're Rashida Tlaib, and not even AOC wants to go that far nut. And therefore, Chris Van Hollen, he's running for president, obviously. He's just trying to get out there on the left edge of the Democratic Party. More when we come back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The other article that came out today in First Things about the late Francis was by Robert Reno, R.R. Reno. And it's in First Things as well. I will link to it on my X account. I want to read it to you right now. It's titled, The Jesuit Pope. A remarkable man has passed from the scene, writes Reno. The Society of Jesus got its start nearly 500 years ago and soon grew to become the most influential and feared religious order in post-Reformation Europe. Francis was the first Jesuit elected to the chair of St. Peter, a historic milestone that defined his tenure as chief pastor of the Catholic Church. Historians will look back and weigh the specific achievements and failures of his 12 years as Pope, but the tone, tenor, and tendency of his leadership of the Church reflected the distinctive personality of the Society of Jesus, colored by his own fiery temperament. Jesuits are operators, writes Reno. It's encouraged by their formation. At the center of their training are the spiritual exercises, a pattern of meditation and prayer established by the founder of the Society of Jesus, St. Ignatius of Loyola. The exercises are undertaken in solitude. Their purpose is to make God immediate so that the Jesuit in formation can receive God's distinct mission for him and him alone. I have undertaken an 8-day version of the spiritual exercises. The 30-day version is required for Jesuits at various stages of their formation. I can report that it is a very powerful tool for discerning the one thing God is calling you to do. The effect of this formation is holy single-mindedness, which often produces an impatience with impediments, even those created by moral and religious duties. For example, St. Ignatius allowed members of his order to dispense with the historic obligation of clergy to say the divine office, the morning and evening prayers known as the breviary. They could do so if their apostolic mission required. Matteo Ricci, a Jesuit who went to China in the 16th century, famously dispensed with clerical garb and took on the appearance of a Confucian sage the better to evangelize Chinese elites. In the 17th and 18th century, Jesuits wormed their way into royal courts, famous as confessors who were not too demanding. They were accused of permitting duplicity, especially in their own ministries. During that era, the term Jesuitical was coined. It means making nice distinctions that turn prohibitions into permissions. All of this and more was akin to St. Ignatius' suspension of the obligation to say the divine office. One must do what is necessary to succeed in one's mission assigned by God, as Reno writes. The pontificate of Pope Francis manifested a Jesuit impatience with constraining tradition and limiting rules. For many centuries, the Archbishop of Milan and the Patriarch of Venice were cardinals. Today, neither is a cardinal. It was a venerable tradition that Pope Francis broke away from. Although Amoris Laetitia, the controversial document that seems to permit divorced and remarried Catholics to receive communion, features nice and, dare I say, Jesuitical reasoning, Pope Francis appears to have cared little about the theological details. What mattered was the outcome. In my estimation, writes Reno, this approach arose from a subtle cultural political calculation that a very moderate concession to the sexual revolution would buy time, allowing the Catholic Church to navigate the choppy waters of today's non-traditional attitudes towards sex, marriage, and many other intimate aspects of life. If this is the case, I must allow that it was not a foolish move on the chessboard of cultural politics. Under his leadership, the Catholic Church made no significant change to the teachings that are at odds with the sexual revolution. I think Francis was also making a clever move in the contest between the German Church and Rome. The small concession of allowing divorced and remarried Catholics to receive communion, along with rhetorical gestures suggesting much greater concessions were forthcoming, allowed Francis to stiff-arm the German demands for formal and official accommodations to the sexual revolution. As I noted, Jesuits are operators. A similar path was taken with the Chinese Church. A secret agreement was made with the Chinese Communist Party concerning the governance of the church in China. No surprise there. Secrecy is the ideal métier for a Jesuit, allowing for all the matters to be dealt with behind closed doors, relying on diplomacy and intrigue. If China becomes a Catholic nation in the next 100 years, Francis will have been vindicated in his tactics. Pope Francis's most widely read encyclical was Laudato Si. It too was politically clever. The topic addressed was environmentalism, especially climate change. This represented a shift away from marriage, abortion, and sexual ethics, themes treated by John Paul II and Benedict. Catholic teachings on these topics are unpopular with Western elites. By contrast, they are enthusiastic about climate change and climate activism. And at points, Laudato Si sounds like a UN panel on climate change. Yet the encyclical also includes what is, in effect, a denunciation of Western capitalist and technological culture. Again, a remarkable political move, cozying up to Western elites while undermining the economic, cultural foundations of their power. In his relations with the United States, Pope Francis was less nimble. The effort to suppress the Latin Mass in the United States was ham-fisted. Perhaps the political missteps arose because Francis's inner circle were troubled by the combination of faith and vitality in American Catholicism, a combination that made the American bishops harder to manipulate. Or maybe it reflected the habitual anti-Americanism of Latin Americans of his generation. Underscore that sentence. Or maybe it reflected the habitual anti-Americanism of Latin Americans of his generation, because that's what I think it was. Whatever the cause, it was the exception to the usual misdirection and double messaging that characterized his style of governance. Argentines have a joke about General Juan Perón. He's sitting in the back of his limousine as it approaches an intersection. The driver leans back, asks, "Generale, which way should I turn?" Perón answers, "Signal left, turn right." The same joke could be told about many Jesuits. Pope Francis was a Peronist and a Jesuit. His pontificate amounted to 12 years of maneuvering, sometimes artfully, sometimes not so artfully. Everything was made into an instrument, including doctrines, synodal meetings, church offices, and more. In this regard, the pontificate was purely personal, resting in the mystery of the one thing that God was calling Jorge Bergoglio to do as a soldier of Christ. As a result, the pontificate's divisive character dies with him, leaving little other than astonishment. I'll be right back. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Arguably, Pope Francis was the most famous person on the planet. There are 1.4 billion Catholics. A lot of people who aren't Catholic follow him. A lot of people loved him. I'm going to replay an interview I did with Wim Wenders, the film director, from 2018. He made a movie about Francis. He loved Francis. I've read you Archbishop Chet Pugh's reminiscences and R.R. Reno, the editor of First Things. Reno ends his essay, "I pray for the repose of Pope Francis's soul." Every good Catholic should. "May he rest in the arms of Christ, whom he sought so ardently to serve. Amen. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and may perpetual light shine on Francis. May he rest in peace. Amen." But I do think absolutely that Reno is correct when he said Francis's pontificate reflected the habitual anti-Americanism of Latin Americans of his generation. I mean, I really thought They just didn't like Americans. And that's a Latin American, South American thing. And when I visited the Metropolitan Cathedral in Argentina after he had been made Pope, I realized that the tomb of the president, of the founder of the Republic, and maybe the tomb of the unknown soldier is inside the cathedral. There's like no separation of church and state in Argentina. It's the Catholic Church and it's the state. And that's kind of a weird thing. I wonder if the cardinals thought about that. All I have to say, and if any of you are bound for Rome in the company of a cardinal, just whisper to them, please. It's been since 1995 that the Roman Catholic Church has had a leader who was under 75 years of age. In 1994, John Paul II was 74. So in 1995, he turned, and we've had two giants, right? John Paul II is a saint because he was a giant. Benedict is going to be a doctor of the church. So two giants are tough to follow. So I have a little bit of sympathy for Francis. He's following in the footsteps of giants, and it couldn't have been easy. Plus, he's a Jesuit. That couldn't have been easy. All I would like now is someone that the cardinals could agree will result in more people understanding the message of Christ, more people going to Mass, and more young men called to being priests, or older men, or younger men, middle-aged men, men who are eligible, good men, to become priests. We've been coasting along at 400,000 priests for 25 years. We need vocations up. Mass attendance is down around the world. We need some energy. We really do need some leadership and some energy. Don't need new doctrine. Doctrine is great. We don't need tricks or gimmicks. We need a good communicator like John Paul II and a great intellect like Benedict. And it doesn't hurt to have a gentle touch like Francis. But we really got to have energy and intellect. Energy and intellect. All right, Cardinals, as you gather, there are 185 of you. I thought John Paul said there could only be 120 or something like that, but I don't know the rule. There are 185 Cardinals who are eligible to vote. And do your jobs well, gentlemen. It matters a lot after the last 13 years. Stand by. I'll be right back with hour number 2 of today's Hugh Hewitt Show.